Hello, everyone, and welcome to our viewer audience, and welcome to our Community Conversations for Cancer Health Equity series. I'm Dante Moorhead, the Community Health Educator for African American, African Descent populations here with the Office of Community Outreach and Engagement. And first, we acknowledge that the Fred Hutch University Washington Cancer Consortium sits on the traditional land of the first peoples of Seattle, the Duwamish, and other Coast Salish peoples, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself, which was taken from its original caretakers. And so we take the opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land who are still here. And so we are the Office of Community Outreach and Engagement, and we are dedicated to achieving better outcomes for everyone. And so today I'm excited to have what I consider a long overdue sit down with Marissa Thomas and Jasmine Souers, the co-founders of For the Breast of Us, all melanin, all moxie, all together. And we hope you are well. And today we are going to have a great chat about For the Breast of Us, the resources that they offer, and their important work with women of color in the breast cancer community. And so thanks again for being with me here today, you two.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So I just want to start at the beginning. So tell us about what For the Breast of Us is. Great name, by the way. And just tell us about what For the Breast of Us is all about.
Well, the name was actually the best gift my ex-husband could have given us. we were tossing like a few things, and I was like, he's not creative, and looked over at him one day and he was like, For the Breast of Us. Yes.
Wow.
So it is the first online community that is inclusive to all women of color affected by breast cancer. There are so many different pockets where you have like an Asian community and a Black community, Hispanic community, but really we saw that there was power in harnessing the collective voice of marginalized women and using us to help each other along our journeys, and using each other to amplify the different challenges that we're experiencing. Because a lot of these communities have challenges, but not a lot of us are really making a lot of progress on our own. And I guess, Marissa, you can speak to a little bit of what our community means and the kind of things that we offer to our ladies.
Yes, so just like Jasmine said, most of the other organizations that we know of in the community were mostly focusing on Black women, and we knew that there was a need for all women of color. And so the women in our community definitely means so much to us, just in the fact of that For the Breast of Us is the first time that they were able to feel seen and heard in a space, a dedicated space just for them, and a space where they could be open and honest about how they were feeling with their diagnosis, their family, their friends, whatever the case may be. And it's just been beautiful to see everyone flourish. With For the Breast of Us right now, we do have baddie ambassadors, what we call, and these are just women within the community who advocate in their respective communities, whether that be in person or online and social media. And what we're trying to do is just basically help women not only live their best lives, but actually advocate for themselves and any other women that come behind them.
And the great thing about like creating this inclusive space is there are so many women that felt like they weren't enough. They weren't Latina enough. They weren't Black enough to fit into all of these different groups. So now we've created this space where it's like, come one, come all. And that's been beautiful. And from women that are in every stage of journey, from the pre-vivers to metastatic breast cancer, we've really created a space where everyone feels a sense of belonging. And I think that's been really beautiful and very powerful.
I love it. I love the whole concept of the baddie ambassadors. I think that's really cool. It's always been cool. So, so both of you are also survivors yourself, and you've spoken about how the space was needed, but you were both survivors diagnosed with breast cancer yourself. What could you talk about your own experience and what you learned from your own experience and how that led up to motivating you to create this organization even more?
So for me, I was diagnosed at 26, misdiagnosed at 25. That was like my first hard lesson in the importance of self-advocacy and pushing for answers and realizing that doctors do make mistakes, and understanding the importance of second opinions. Traditionally, I think a lot of communities is like what the doctor says is what the doctor says, and we go with that. And once I was misdiagnosed, it was like, oh no, I got to ask questions. And I got to learn this for myself so I know what I'm getting myself into. And that just was not the way that I was that I grew up navigating healthcare. Like, it's just like the doctor gives you medicine and that's just it. Being misdiagnosed and being diagnosed so young, I remember like, and Marissa probably went through this too because she was diagnosed only a few years older than me. But being like the breast cancer baby, like you don't fit into the support groups. You're not going to, even in your friend groups, no one knows what to do with you because in my age group, everyone's getting married, everyone's having babies, and here I am with cancer. And so it was this really isolating experience, one, to go through it personally, and then to go online and try to figure out why I couldn't see other Black women with breast cancer, why I couldn't find stories of other Black women, why couldn't I find images of what mastectomies look like or radiation. That was, one, it's a little daunting, especially when you realize the mortality rate for a Black woman with breast cancer. And it almost feels like, geez, are there any of us out there like surviving? What's going on? Right. And then second, it just really, it like reemphasizes that sense of isolation. And so for me, for the rest of us, was part necessity. After learning about the lack of representation in so many different areas in the breast cancer community. And then it was also becoming the woman that I wish existed when I was going through, and giving other women that opportunity as well.
Yeah, and like Jasmine said, I was diagnosed at the age of 35. My treatment, I would say, is a little bit different than some of the other women in our community, whereas a lot of the women in our community come from really urban areas where they're only just isolated to their medical communities that are there, or they're in a rural area where they can't really get that much, really good treatment. And so for myself, I've worked in healthcare for 20 years, so I know how to navigate the system. So it was a little bit easier for me to go through and kind of push more and just say, even though the doctor's saying this, I can definitely know that I can push this and go a different way. And I think that's the awesome thing about Jasmine and I, is that we know how to advocate for ourselves, and actually teaching the women who are in our community how to do that as well. Just like Jasmine was saying, when we were both diagnosed, trying to find women that looked like us or women that were going through the same thing was really hard. If you even search just right now, the hashtag on Instagram, breast cancer, 9 times out of 10, most of the women you're going to see are Caucasian women, not really going to be women of color. And that's one thing that for the rest of us is trying to change by, developing some of our own hashtags and, letting our community know to use that. If you do the hashtag breast cancer baddies right now on Instagram, it's so many thousands of women who are using that hashtag now and who are following it. And that's a hashtag that for the rest of us had started. And so that's beautiful to see. When Jasmine and I met at the YSC Young Survival Coalition Summit back in 2019, we met a woman there named Terlisa who lives with metastatic breast cancer. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jasmine, I believe she's been living with metastatic breast cancer for about 20 years now.
She was about 20 years NED. Which is like unheard of, you know, and NED meaning no evidence of disease. So we try to be very sensitive to not saying cancer free, because as both of us have trained advocates, we know that life happens, right? You can go 5-6 years, no evidence of disease, and all of a sudden have a recurrence. So we try to be very sensitive to that language. So she went 20 years NED until like the last couple of years.
Right. And so for us to see a woman like that, who is African-American, who is thriving with metastatic breast cancer, and us being like, wow, so there are women like that who are out here like us, because for a lot of us beforehand, you would think if you're diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, you're just automatically going to die, which that is not the case. We are finding more and more women who unfortunately are living with stage 4 or metastatic breast cancer, but they are thriving in their own ways.
Okay. Yeah, there are a lot of women out there. Thank you. And you mentioned, all those women out there, and you talked about how you were the first online, or one of the first online forums. And you were doing that before COVID, by the way, before everybody else went online. So I just want to point that out. But I also wanted you to speak to the importance in our audience about why having that virtual presence or that online presence is so important, and how you make it work and why that's helpful.
Like we did a lot of research, and I think we kind of rocked the scene a little bit, because we met in March of 2019, and then we came out of nowhere to everybody else. in
almost
like
everybody.
May 2019, and we were like, we're here. And there
True.
were other online spaces, but there were no online inclusive spaces like this. And so being ahead of the curve for us, it's not really like, I mean, it's an option to be in person, but not to the magnitude that we are online, just because we're already in person and we're already having a hard time finding other women in our cities. So the benefit of being online kind of increases that reach and allows women to build connections across the world. Like when we look at the stats, we just celebrated our 2-year anniversary. We look at the stats, our stories were read in over 123 countries. Like women are learning and connecting from literally all over the world. And that's one of the biggest benefits of being in a virtual space, not necessarily having to depend on going to your local cancer center and being able to find someone on you, but being able to search breast cancer baddie hashtag and find all these different women that are experiencing something that you're going through as well.
Right. And Jasmine and I were actually just talking about this yesterday about how we were definitely ahead of the curve because we were just exclusively online and then COVID hit in 2020. And so while a lot of our counterparts had to pivot to that and figure out how to work, we were already working that. And so a lot of people had to catch up to us. And, you know, the funny thing is, right. Yeah. And the funny thing about it is too, right. It's like now they're catching up to us and we're already moving past that curve because it's something that worked for us. And for like myself personally, when I was diagnosed, I didn't want to go sit in in-person support groups. I just wasn't ready for that. And I think with a lot of women of color, they just aren't, because like what Jasmine said, it's hard to find somebody that you can identify with. But online, as we know, and as COVID has shown us, it's easy to connect with other women online, regardless of who they are or where they are. And so that actually makes for the rest of us unique in itself.
And even though we're small, we're watched by a lot of the big dogs and we know it. The way that we really dedicated a space to sharing stories in an authentic way. We're not a nonprofit, we're an LLC, and we really just had intentions of creating a blog site. And once we realized that we had the attention of women that are so marginalized and so left out of the conversation, it's like, okay, what can we do more with this space? But we were probably one of the first breast cancer talk shows that went to Facebook. So many have come after us. It's called Baddies Talk Back, a monthly video podcast, and we talk about all these different aspects of the journey live with women, having those conversations that have been a little taboo in other places, from relationships and sex to fear of recurrence and this divide between early stagers and the Meta Thriver community. Our Facebook group in about a year was over 1,000 women and continuing to grow, and women are finding us closer and closer to their treatment, which I think is absolutely amazing. Our Instagram page, about 7,000 people in 2 years. And our campaigns, from the One Word Project that we did our first BCAM Breast Cancer Awareness Month, where we asked women to describe their journey in their words. Because when you're a nonprofit, I work in the nonprofit space. I worked in the nonprofit space for over a decade in marketing and fundraising. And when you're in that space, I think you feel held to sharing a certain perspective of breast cancer. And oftentimes it's this happy narrative, it's this winning narrative, it's the ringing the bell. And the reality is that breast cancer sucks, right? Some of us grow through it. I was one of those people who grew through it, but so much of it sucks. And so many women will never get to ring the bell. And so we've had the One Word Project that allow women to say, if you could sum up your journey in one word, what would that be? And some people were frightened and some people were resilient. But the idea is that we define our own narratives. And one of my favorite poems is Our Deepest Fear by Marianne Williamson. And there's a line in there about how when you shine your light, you give other people permission to do the same. And that's kind of like the sacred energy of this space. Coming from a place where you didn't see women sharing their stories that look like you, and now you see women that are being raw and authentic and honest, and it lets you go, I'm not alone.
It sounds like a truly great space. And I know a lot of women connect there. They share their stories there. and everything like that. Do you have educational resources and cancer prevention tips on your website as well, or what other kinds of resources would we be able to find on your site as far as that's concerned?
I mean,
So
I guess,
go ahead.
Well, one thing I would say is I definitely wouldn't say cancer prevention.
Right.
We definitely don't try to say that.
Okay.
But we definitely do. We have a resource library
Okay.
where women can go there and they can look up terms when it comes to breast cancer. We also have, a lot of the blogs, they have a lot of tips in there, like how do you help somebody that is getting ready to have a mastectomy? We've had women write, tips for women that way, or there are different types of surgery. There's a new surgery out. Is it called AFLAP? Jasmine?
And pap flap I've been hearing
Yeah.
about. Well, yeah.
And it's a new surgery. So we had a baddie write about that, and that's just one where instead of with the deep flap, which is the type of reconstruction surgery where they usually take fat from your abdomen or skin from your abdomen, then they take it from your thighs if you're too small and you don't have enough skin in your abdomen area. So just learning about those type of different things.
And then we also do, thanks to the encouragement of Fred Hutch, we've been doing a series of webinars. Our first webinar was a shared decision-making webinar that we did in partnership with you guys. And people after it, they were like, this is one of the best things that I've ever seen. And since then, we've gone on to do multiple webinars from mental and physical wellness to one of our most popular one was Get Your Sexy Back, talking about sexual health. And we've just created this space where we're empowering women with knowledge. And I think people ask me what one of the biggest gaps is, and I think it's information, it's knowledge. And when you give someone the knowledge, you allow them to make the best decisions for themselves. And that's what we want women to do, to live out their personal definition of quality of life.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you both once again, Marissa and Jasmine. And if you could, I want you to offer some final words of wisdom for our viewers out there and women of color out there with similar experiences, and then tell them where they can find you.
I guess my advice would be to women, don't be afraid to share your story and don't be afraid to just live your life out loud. I know that a breast cancer diagnosis can definitely, shake and rock your world, but going ahead and live it the way how you would like to live it and not on anybody else's terms. I'll share some of the places that they can find us, and then I'll let Jasmine share some of the places too, but definitely on Instagram, we're at For the Breast of Us. And then we are also on Twitter at The Breast of Us, and people can reach us there as well as our website. And I'll let Jasmine take it away from here.
So I think piggybacking off of Marissa's thought, self-advocacy is very important. And I think one of the things that's missing from the conversation and breast cancer in general is this idea of our personal definition of quality of life. So often we are put in these positions where people make decisions for us, and we have to shift to making decisions with our cancer care team. So I would say after you're diagnosed to take a minute and think about what you want your life to look like when you're at the end of active treatment, if you have an end, or what you want the rest of your life to look like if you are going to be on treatment for the rest of your life. Our website is breastofus.com. And did you mention Facebook? They can also find us on Facebook at The Breast of Us, and our Facebook group is Breast Cancer Baddies.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And thank you again to both of our amazing guests, Marissa and Jasmine. It's always a pleasure. And you can all learn more about For the Breast of Us at breastofus.com. And we will also have links and resources provided on our own resource channels on Facebook and Twitter as well. I believe we do follow For the Breast of Us as well on Twitter. So look for those resources. And thank you all once again for being a part of our community conversations for cancer health equity. We are the Office of Community Outreach and Engagement and For the Breast of Us. And we are dedicated to achieving better outcomes for everyone. Thank you once again.
Thank you.